Hey guys, and welcome back to the Layah Heilpern show. Today, Bitcoin is pumping, and we need to find out why. It's right now at $19,200 for the first time in months. We're also going to speak to an expert to find out whether Bitcoin really can fight censorship. So, joining me today to have this conversation is Ryan Condron, the founder of Lumen. Ryan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Doing good. Today's a good day.
Yeah, it is a good day. Bitcoin is pumping. It's the highest it's been in a very long time. So I'm really excited to have this chat with you. So before we get into all of this, let's just get a little bit about your background and also explain to me what Lumen is in its simplest terms.
Okay, so I'll try to keep it succinct as possible. I got into Bitcoin mining in late 2012. My buddy Kyle came to me and told me about this crazy thing called Bitcoin. I was super skeptical at first, but the more I got involved in forums, the more I read about it, the more I just realized that this is really just a revolutionary technology for value transfer. Got really heavily into mining, started writing profitability calculators and mining tools and hardware comparison sites and all sorts of fun tools early on. We launched a company called Titan in 2018 for mining management software, and then we pivoted to larger, better, more optimized Bitcoin mining tools. And we launched the Lumen network last year. So Lumen is a decentralized routing protocol. So this idea that we can create digital piping underneath all the other networks for routing information from socket to socket based on smart contract rules. That gives us a really cool toolbox for creating things like decentralized digital commodities. And the first one that we're starting with is hash power.
So let's get into this and unpack what all of that means. Because I titled this, Can Bitcoin Fight Censorship? And from previous conversations that I've had with you, I understand that Lumen helps decentralize Bitcoin better. So in some ways, would you say that mining right now is somewhat centralized? And if you provide this marketplace for the hash power, does that make it more decentralized? And would that be a good thing?
Yeah, so right now there's a couple areas of centralization in mining. So one is you have incredibly large mining facilities will pack thousands of these little toasters in facilities all around the world, and there's typically one or two decision makers on where those toasters are pointed. Just to give people a recap of what we're dealing with here is you have an ASIC, which is a specific designed machine for one type of algorithm. So in this case, it's SHA-256 for Bitcoin. And if you show someone this little metal box with hundreds of chips in it with fans on it, and you say if you plug this in, it's going to print money for you. Well, if you show that to a really wealthy person, they're going to be like, okay, how many can I have and where can I put them? So you have people that don't necessarily have a lot of technical background will be pumping tens of millions of dollars into these machines. And they're just putting them all around the world where they can find cheap electricity, favorable governments, and stable infrastructure. So now you have more centralization around, just these heavily, very large facilities that have lots of investment money in them. So there's a lot of centralization around there. The next layer of centralization is around the pools. So right now, if we really look at the pool ecosystem, we really have two pools. We have Foundry and we have Antpool. Antpool actually is the back end to a lot of other pools as well. That's kind of the secret that no one wants to talk about. So Antpool actually is the largest pool in the world. You just don't realize it because there's other pools with their branding on top of Antpool. So you think it's a different pool, but it's really not. So we saw an article come out last week saying, Foundry and Antpool have mined 51% of the blocks over the last couple of months. In reality, they've been mining the majority of the blocks for probably over a year now, but no one's been talking about it. So I'd say those are the two main areas of centralization. Where Lumen helps with this, where the hash power marketplace helps with this, is it really brings more decision makers into the room. So if you have a mining facility with 100,000 of these little toasters in it, rather than one person deciding where all these toasters are mining to, you can actually put all of these miners up for sale on a decentralized marketplace, what we're calling that a hash rate grid, if you will, rather than a power grid. And now anywhere in the world, someone can buy this hash rate and they get to decide what mining pool they send it to. So more decision makers, more pools will equal greater decentralization and future security.
So for those that don't fully understand the difference between centralization and decentralization, why is it important to decentralize the Bitcoin network further?
So this is a great question, because a lot of times people get confused between decentralization and distributed, right? So what's decentralized versus distributed? Distributed is this idea is you have it all over the place, right? So you have a lot of locations, it's distributed. Decentralized is actually a matter of control, is who has control over the locations. So I could have say a mining facility or a compute company, and I have data centers all over the world, right? Now say like Google has data centers all over the world. They're incredibly distributed, but they're all controlled by Google. So it's actually centralized because it's actually a matter of control. Now, the kicker with Bitcoin is we want to spread out the control because we want it to be completely censorship resistant when it comes to governments or any institution or authority. It has to be completely decentralized so not one entity can actually control it. That's why it's really, really important that it's both distributed and decentralized. So distributed Bitcoin nodes all over the world, miners all over the world, decentralized, lots of decision makers all over the world deciding how the Bitcoin network is actually used and how the protocol is propagated.
And you do this by creating this marketplace where people can buy and sell hash power. There we go. There we go. Now we can see better. So you do this by creating a marketplace of hash power where people can buy and sell it. So can you explain what hash power is for those that don't know, and how does that make the Bitcoin network more decentralized?
Yeah, so we can go pretty far down the rabbit hole here, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible.
As simple as possible, please.
So when you're solving a Bitcoin block, so a Bitcoin block is actually a block of transactions that is hashed, and you have to solve what they call a difficulty target. Okay, now this can get pretty complicated pretty fast. So essentially what these miners are doing, these little toasters, if you will, they're guessing numbers really, really fast. Okay. To the tune of, the current hardware is about 140 terahashes a second. That means terahashes is trillion hashes. So that means you're saying 140 trillion guesses a second is how fast these things are guessing numbers. That's a lot. Now, if we were just guessing lottery numbers, we would probably solve the lottery like that. But we are guessing in this realm of SHA-256 along this elliptical curve algorithm. So the guesses is so astronomically large that it takes about an average of 10 minutes for all of these miners all over the world guessing an average of 100 trillion hashes a second to find the solution to this puzzle. Okay, so that's what we have, is we have these toasters that are guessing numbers really, really fast. And whoever finds that magic number that unlocks the puzzle is the one that wins the prize of solving the Bitcoin block. Okay, so that's essentially what mining is. So for the hash rate marketplace, hash rate is how fast it's guessing numbers, and it's compute power. It's these machines are burning a lot of electricity and creating a lot of heat and a lot of noise in order to guess these numbers. And this compute power is valuable because it's over time, you will guess the right number and you will unlock a Bitcoin block and you'll get a reward. Mining pools will actually pay you out for the incremental work that you do every 24 hours. So what individuals will do for the hash power marketplace is they can buy hash rate from anywhere in the world anonymously. So you could be in the middle of the jungle of Brazil and say, I want to mine Bitcoin. And as long as you have an internet connection or some way to access the marketplace, you can connect your Web3 wallet, you can purchase hash power, and you can point the hash power towards a mining pool of your choosing, and it's your account, you actually receive the hash power directly, and you forward that hash power onto your mining pool. Now, no one knows who you are. No one knows where you're forwarding the hash power. It is actually your digital commodity, as though you're buying electricity off the electricity grid, or I'm sorry, off the power grid. So, you know, this idea of making Bitcoin fully decentralized is this idea of bringing more decision makers into this buying process, into the decision process of where to send hash power. Hopefully I answered the question, because that can get pretty convoluted pretty fast.
Yeah, it can get very technical. I think the way that I would say is sort of like the hash power is in simple terms, this isn't going to be completely correct, but is the computational power needed to basically mine the Bitcoin and create Bitcoin. And it's very hard sometimes to get hold of that kind of technology. It's very expensive sometimes. You know, the whole infrastructure is a lot. So in order to just being able to have the ability to buy the hash power and then go ahead and mine it yourself, no, I think is really useful, especially because many countries right now are obviously cracking down on Bitcoin, especially Bitcoin mining, more specifically. We saw China ban it, and obviously the US are stepping up their regulations. So how does this help circumvent government regulations and enable people in all sorts of countries the opportunity to mine Bitcoin?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit. You know, I don't want to propagate a message of circumventing your governmental laws. Obviously, if you are under a governmental authority that is saying to, you know, not use electricity in a certain way, or, you know, transact with cryptocurrencies in a certain way, like, I'm not going to contradict that. But with Bitcoin, it is borderless, it is global, it is decentralized, and somewhat anonymous. So when we have something that powerful, where you can literally move $1 billion from one address to another address in a matter of minutes, and no one is going to know who you are, where it came from, or where it's going, there's no other financial rails on the face of the earth that can do that right now. That's Bitcoin. That's the power of Bitcoin. And we actually saw that a couple of years ago, where someone actually moved $1 billion between one address and another address. They paid about $700 to do the transaction, and it settled in about like 30 or 40 minutes. And it was completely anonymous. People just saw the transaction happen, and no government was seemingly involved, and no bank was seemingly involved. So, I mean, that's true financial freedom, and that's why we're doing this, is because it allows you to control your money. Now, hash power is actually Bitcoin over time. Like, so if you have hash power over time, it equals Bitcoin. Okay, it's the there is a direct ratio there. If you have a certain amount of hash power for 24 hours, it will equate to a certain amount of Bitcoin. So if you have a country that does not allow you to buy Bitcoin, or say they're locking down the rails for acquiring Bitcoin, where you have to go through some type of KYC AML process, not really naming any countries here, but, you know, a lot of people know what those acronyms mean for a reason. It does lock down the ability for people to acquire Bitcoin, right? And it is taking this incredibly free system, and it's trying to put shackles on the on-ramp and off-ramp of the system. We already see exchanges. If you want to move from Bitcoin into fiat, unless you actually do it in person, in cash with someone, there is going to be controls in a lot of governments right now that are trying to keep you from moving in and out of cryptocurrency. What's amazing with hash power is you can take any compute power anywhere on the face of the earth, and you can convert it into Bitcoin. You could mine Bitcoin on your cell phone, you can mine Bitcoin on your tablet, you can mine Bitcoin on your computer. Really, any chip in most of our devices are capable of doing the SHA-256 algorithm. Now, the mining hardware that we see at scale obviously can guess these numbers a lot faster than what your cell phone can do. So the amount of Bitcoin you're going to earn on your cell phone is almost non-substantial compared to what you can get with one of these mining machines, right? So what we want to do is we want to provide global, anonymous, decentralized access to real hash power. So these machines that are in bulk in these facilities all around the world that have cheap electricity, good infrastructure, and favorable governments, you can now buy that hash power anywhere in the world with your Web3 wallet, and then acquire Bitcoin anonymously. My camera keeps tilting down, but I'm gonna see if I can tighten it up a little bit.
Also, your Wi-Fi is a little scratchy, by the way. You're a little pixelated.
Oh man.
You're a little pixelated.
Okay. Well, hopefully
I can hear you
someone's trying to
perfectly.
censor the message here.
I know, I always say that. I actually did an interview once with this like #1 conspiracy theorist, and I was explaining why Bitcoin's so amazing, and I lost my voice at that exact moment. It was like a 2-hour interview, and at that moment, my voice went. Okay, so thank you for explaining all of that. I think it's really fascinating. What I'd like to understand is, how does this then help firstly secure the network, but also, what do people need? Do they need ASIC mining machines? Do they need some kind of a Lumen machine? You know, once they've bought the hash power from your marketplace, what then do they need to mine the Bitcoin?
So we're trying to make this as easy as possible.
Yes.
You know, right now this is very early on technology. So in order to have the full validation of what you're buying, which is the hash rate flow, you're going to have to download the Lumen wallet, which is the proxy node. It's kind of that go-between that checks your product as you receive it. So you would go onto the Lumen marketplace. So if you go to lumen.io, there's a marketplace link. Now this is all a closed beta right now. We're planning to launch this in the next month or so. We're still ironing out a few bugs because it is highly technical, and trying to do this, you know, fully decentralized and anonymous and still provable. It is not an easy problem to solve. I often tell the team, you know, if this was easy, someone else would have already done it. We've been at this for now 2 years, writing the code, testing the code, iterating on it, working on mining pool infrastructure to make sure that, you know, we actually have all the pieces in place that this ecosystem is going to need. So in order to purchase Lumen hash rate, what you do is go to lumen.io, you'll click on the link to the marketplace, you'll connect your Web3 wallet, and then you'll see all of the hash power contracts listed right there, and those are on-chain contracts. So, you know, you don't have to go through the Lumen marketplace. We just have built like a user interface on top of these smart contracts to make it easy for you. Really, anyone could actually build an interface on top of these contracts. So once you have your Web3 wallet connected, you simply purchase the contract and you enter your routing destination. So basically, where do you want the hash rate sent to? For the majority of the users, this is going to be their mining pool account. So they could go to Slush Pool, they could go to F2 Pool, they could go to Ant Pool. They could sign up for an account. They will get the routing information and their username from there. And this is the information they'll put into the marketplace. There is, you know, it's a little bit technical. If you've never mined before, if you've never worked in this ecosystem before, you know, we're writing guides for it. We have the Telegram channel that we're going to be answering questions for once the marketplace goes live to help people through this process. But the end goal is to make it as easy as possible for anyone with a Web3 wallet to acquire Bitcoin decentralized anonymously through Hashrate.
And so they don't need to be buying any of that Bitcoin mining equipment, no ASICs, nothing.
Correct. The Bitcoin mining equipment, we're going to be treating it a lot like AWS, which is, for those who don't know, AWS is Amazon Web Services. So Amazon is a massive global company that sells all those products that you've come to love. You know, as far as everything from the Alexa products to just about any product on earth, you can open up an Amazon account, you can buy Amazon stuff. But the majority of Amazon's income is actually through AWS. It's actually their web hosting services, and not a lot of people know that. They actually have server farms, or I guess server facilities, data centers all over the world with servers in them, and they sell web services. So similar to what AWS is, we really see that this is the future of mining, where you have these mining farms set up all over the world, and they're selling hash power. And that hash power is all going to funnel into a marketplace, and then those that want to use the hash power will purchase it and mine with it.
So does everything that we've spoken about then promote long-term security for the Bitcoin network?
Yes, absolutely. So, and this is something that I'm really passionate about, because, you know, we are putting our life's work into this technology. You know, we've invested billions and billions of dollars of time, infrastructure, and just straight up cash into Bitcoin, we want to make sure that it lasts. And when you see things like centralization around mining pools, when you see things around centralization for the control of hash rate, those are red flags in my book. So we want to make sure that this ecosystem lasts. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that it's both distributed and decentralized, right? So to get both of them, right now we have distributed, we have nodes all over the world, but we need it to be decentralized. So the decision makers around transaction processing needs to be decentralized through the global distribution of hash rate.
Yeah, and I think it's I love that distinction that you made earlier between distributed and decentralized. It's a great point. I actually had never considered, I mean, it goes without saying when you're, when you're interested in this kind of space, but I'd never actually had that distinction at the forefront of my mind. So that's really interesting. And another concern I'm always hearing, particularly from the World Economic Forum, is that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. So I'm interested to understand, does Lumen reduce or solve this concern in any way?
Oh my goodness. So first of all, like Bitcoin being bad for the environment, it's just, it's kind of silly. Because it's layered on so many premises, right? First of all, why is Bitcoin bad for the environment? Oh, because Bitcoin mining uses electricity. So this proof of work ecosystem uses electricity. And the misnomer now that we're believing is using electricity is bad for the environment. Okay, well, why is using electricity bad for the environment? Well, it's because creating electricity is bad for the environment. And we say, okay, well, why is creating electricity bad for the environment? Oh, because it's burning fossil fuels, it's burning coal, it's burning oil or natural gas to create electricity. Well, first of all, that's not even how the majority of the electricity in this world is created, number one. Number two, there's so many regulations now around the certain types of electricity that this idea that you have these big bad, fossil fuel plants that are polluting the environment to create electricity really is very much a thing of the past now. The amount of hydroelectric facilities we have, the amount of nuclear facilities we have, the amount of solar and wind generation we have, it's really tipping the scales on production. So creating electricity is not bad for the environment for the majority of the power grids, especially here in the US. If you go to just about any miner in the US, they'll be able to tell you exactly what their mix of power is, how much renewable they have, how much nuclear, wind, solar. They're actually very, very on top of what their energy mix is. The majority of the world's miners are incredibly responsible when it comes to how they're generating Bitcoin and how they're, what kind of electricity they're using. So let me fix this here. That's one thing. The second thing is a lot of Bitcoin miners actually work with the local energy grids to do curtailment, and they'll actually ramp down the amount of electricity they use when the grid needs more power. Then when the consumers don't need that much power, the Bitcoin miners will ramp up again. Now, what this actually does is it balances the electricity grid. What a lot of people don't understand is you can only use electricity, or you can only create electricity when someone's using electricity, okay? There's no just create electricity and fill this grid and let people use it when they need it. It's electricity only flows when you're using it. If you're not using electricity, there's no completed circuit, no electricity will flow. So you'll have things like battery arrays trying to take up some excess electricity. That's incredibly expensive, but that's a whole, I could talk for hours on balancing electricity grid. The thing to know is this is one of the hardest things when it comes to an electricity grid or a power grid is balancing it. Here in the US, we have about, I think it's like a 0.4 hertz tolerance before we have blackouts on balancing the grid. If you put too much electricity on the grid that you're not using, the frequency of electricity goes up and you have a blackout. If you don't put enough electricity on the grid that people are using too much, then you'll have lower frequency on the grid and you'll have a blackout. So balancing the grid is incredibly important. Now, with renewable energy like solar panels and wind, you can't just turn them off and on. When the wind is blowing, the turbine on the wind generator is rotating and you're creating electricity. When the sun is shining, the solar panel is creating electricity. You don't just ramp it up and ramp it down. You don't turn it off and turn it on. With nuclear, hydro, gas, you can regulate how much electricity you're creating to balance the grid. So with renewable sources, and this is the takeaway from all of this, with renewable sources, it's incredibly hard to ramp up and ramp down production to do what they call it load following, okay? Now with Bitcoin mining, you can turn off the miners and turn them back on very quickly, so you can do what's called production following. This completely flips the script, and the key takeaway is Bitcoin mining actually solves an incredible problem for the renewable energy industry. Is it actually allows us to balance the grid for renewable energy. So when you have states like California here in the United States that's requiring the energy on the grid in California to be 100% renewable by 2035, they pass that law and they have no clue how to do that. Bitcoin mining is actually the only way to do that currently, because it's the only thing that could use 100% of electricity 100% of the time and actually be profitable. So long story short, Bitcoin mining actually solves this idea of renewable energy at scale. It's actually an incredible timing for the technology. Lumen and the Lumen marketplace wants to take all that new hash power that's going to be coming on the grid and keeping it decentralized. So if the state of California wants to set up massive mining facilities in the desert of in the deserts outside Palm Springs to balance their massive solar array, we don't want the state of California deciding where they send that hash rate. We want them to sell off the hash rate to people that want to mine with it. And then those miners then get to decide what mining pool or what node they back.
It's so fascinating to me that this isn't something which people are intellectually honest about. I want to just talk a little bit more about balancing the energy grid, because this is so new, and I hear this happens in Texas actually. So you're saying because it's renewable energy, there's really no way, of course, to turn it off. And I mean, I don't know, but so you're saying that the energy grid has to be balanced, because if it's too much, you'll have a power cut. And what if it's too little? You also have a power cut, you're saying?
It's just you have blackouts. Yeah, because
Blackouts.
So here in the U.S., the frequency at which our power it's AC, alternating current. So you have this back and forth of electrons through the power grid that is happening at a certain frequency, right? Now, if you put too much electricity on the grid, that frequency goes up. If you don't put enough electricity on the grid, the frequency goes down.
Right.
You can imagine it like water in pipes. If you put too much water in a pipe, the pressure is going to be super high. So when you turn on your faucet, it's just going to explode, right? If you don't put enough water in the pipes, you don't have enough pressure. So when you turn on the faucet, it's just going to become dribbling out, right? So you can imagine the frequency on the power grid to be kind of like pressure in water pipes. You don't want the pressure to be too high, or it's going to cause damage, and you don't want the pressure to be too low, or it's just things aren't going to work. Same thing with electricity.
That's so fascinating. And this balancing becomes a real issue when we start moving to renewables. Is that the idea? That's why that's such an issue now? Right.
Correct. If we stay with the water analogy, renewables are just constantly pushing more water in the pipes, right?
Yes.
So there's a problem where if you're saying, well, in the middle of summer, it's super hot, people are using a ton of water, their sprinklers are on, their hoses are running, whatever, you need all the water pressure you can get. So they build all these machines that are just going to push water into the pipes as fast as possible. Now, if winter comes around, it's snowing, no one's using that much water, and having water in the pipes is actually dangerous. You have to literally turn off or disconnect these water machines, but they're still pushing water out. What are you going to do with the water? Right? So it's the same thing with solar panels. You could go disconnect the solar panels, but there's no way of just regulating instantly the amount of solar panels that are, pushing electricity onto the grid. So the key is, how do you use all this excess water that's being pushed into pipes when you don't need it? Well, Bitcoin mining. We'll use 100% of it 100% of the time. Just more power, the better.
I love it. It's such a good analogy, the water analogy. Thank you for explaining. So, in a minute, we're going to talk about the markets because Bitcoin is, of course, pumping. But before we do, I just want to finish this topic by understanding, for those who want to mine Bitcoin, they want to get that non-KYC Bitcoin from anywhere in the world, but they're not going to buy the actual machinery. They want to use Lumen. They want to just buy the hash power so they can then send it to a pool and be done with it and just get their fair share of their Bitcoin. So how do they do this? Where do they go?
So, I mean, there's currently centralized services that you can use for renting hash power, renting mining rigs. There are a lot of services that have been around for years that do this in a centralized fashion. What we're doing is decentralized. It's very, very different. It's actually going through smart contracts on another network. So currently, we're launching the marketplace on the Ethereum mainnet. We can launch the same marketplace on, Binance or Cello or any other EVM. The goal is to eventually launch our own Lumen network, because this is a highly specific use case. We don't want to use another network that's going to be cramming a bunch of irrelevant data in these other general compute. We're doing something that's highly specific. We're data routing through socket-socket connections. So we're designing a network specifically for this, what we call decentralized piping. Because our network is meant for decentralized piping, for just setting up the data flows, we could essentially use our network underneath all the other networks as almost a layer 0 network is what we're pushing for. That's still probably a year out or so, just depending on our community involvement, our development schedule. So right now, we're just working on a decentralized hash rate marketplace that we're going to be launching on top of Ethereum. The goal is to have this live within the next couple months. We're internally testing. We started expanding our testing ring, where we're doing kind of friends and family right now, bringing them in for feedback. It's a very complicated thing to achieve, where you have a buyer and a seller that don't trust each other, but they're exchanging a very valuable product. That at any point someone could try to cheat the other person out of it. So we're building a decentralized, trustless ecosystem to exchange this product and still have safety between the buyer and the seller. And that's a hard puzzle to solve. So, long answer to a short question. You could go to lumen.io for updates, and as soon as the marketplace is live, you'll be able to access it through lumen.io.
Okay, great. So what I'll do is I will leave the link to Lumen.io in the YouTube description straight after this. After we're done, this is obviously, we're going live right now. So once we're not live anymore, I will leave a link to Lumen.io. So that's really fascinating. Is there anything else about Lumen you feel like I missed, or did we did we cover everything in the best way possible?
As far as it has to do with hash rates. Lumen is really the only way currently to make this a decentralized system of peer-to-peer distribution of hash rate. So that's what we're really excited about. Eventually, there's going to be other use cases for Lumen that we're exploring. It's this idea of being able to broker an opening and closing of sockets from one device to another device through a smart contract. There are so many use cases for things like that. And, I was even talking to the team a couple months ago, because the reality is, when I call someone on my cell phone, I'm actually opening a data stream from my phone to their phone. And that's happening through a centralized service or a phone company. And I'm using this, this 7-digit or 10-digit number that I do not own, as my identity, right? So whether you're going through T-Mobile or Verizon or one of the international carriers, our identity is tied to a 10-digit number that we do not control. It can be taken away from us at any point. We're using it as two-factor authentication on all our social media.
Yes.
Like, does anyone else think this is insane other than me, that we're tying all of our identity to something that we don't control?
I do.
So that's something else that we can use Lumen for, is we can actually create peer-to-peer communication channels through a smart contract. So now instead of giving someone your phone number for them to contact you, you can give them your Ethereum address. You can give them you can actually assign them an NFT that is routing rules. So basically they can only contact you from a certain time to another time under certain premises, and then you can take away those rules at any point. So the real goal is eventually to get to a communication system where it's transactional communication. I will no longer receive spam. People can't email me unless I've given them permission to email me. They can't text me. They can't call me unless I've given them permission to do so. This is the way communication and identity should work. But that's a little ways down the road, but we'll get there. I'm sure a lot of governments and telecom companies will have something to say about that, though.
Oh, I'm sure they will. All of that sounds amazing. It still blows my mind that people use their mobile phone numbers as 2FA. So please don't do that. That leads to SIM swaps and all these awful fraudulent things that can happen to you. And yeah, that's really interesting. I think, I think owning your own data and the more decentralization, the better. So let's talk a little bit about the market right now, because Bitcoin is pumping out of nowhere. $19,200 today. I think that's $19,300 today. That's the 24-hour high. So what's your take? Why is it pumping? Firstly, we'll start there.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening, right? One, it's a new year. So people reestablish their tax base, selling off at the end of last year, rebuying this year. That's one thing. Another thing could be a change in economic circumstances. We're seeing certain things happen in the economy that are looking positive. That's affecting the market. Now, unfortunately, the crypto markets are still very much tied to the general economy, which you would think would happen in reverse. If our economy is weak, you think Bitcoin would be strong because people are trying to get out of the US dollar. For whatever reason, it's very much tied to each other. So the same people that are speculating on the stock markets are speculating on the crypto markets. I don't know how that makes sense. It should be a hedge against the stock markets and the general economy, but at some point in the future, I really do think the two will become unpegged, and people will realize that crypto and Bitcoin specifically is very much a shelter and hedge against general economies. And that's when we'll see Bitcoin truly break out from the rest of the ecosystem. But for now, for better or worse, they're connected to each other. So we're seeing a lot of positive indicators in the space. I think the shock value of FTX has worn off. We're seeing some rumblings around Genesis. We're seeing some rumblings between Barry and Cameron for the Gemini versus DCG stuff. But it's not really moving the needle. I think people are still very kind of under the scenes bullish. I was at a conference last weekend with a lot of project leaders, and everyone's still very bullish. They're still keeping their heads down and building. So what's interesting is, a lot of people that have been in the space for a long time will say, oh, we're just going through the same cycle. We've been through the cycle 4 or 5 times before. We're in the same 3-year cycle. Now, the question is, because everyone knows that we're in the same 3-year cycle, is this going to break the 3-year cycle? And I think that might be what we're seeing. So it's one of two things. It's either a bear trap, so it's going up where people are going to liquidate and it's going to drop again. One thing that could happen, or two, we're breaking the 3-year cycle because everyone's expecting the 3-year cycle.
I'm expecting the 3 to 4 year cycle. I think this is a bear trap. I'm not sure, but I am long-term bullish. And I think, we're seeing it trade like a normal stock, because I think institutions are trading Bitcoin like a normal stock. But, I still regard Bitcoin as that inflation hedge. I always say right now it's sitting at the all-time high of 2017. Slow and steady. That's what I say. So I know you sort of gave us your, 2 takes. This is either a bear market rally, but How long do you think this bear market is going to go on for? Do you think we've seen the worst? I know you don't think DCG is gonna be another FTX.
I don't know. I can't make that prediction. I don't know what's going on under the scenes there. I will say that one of the worst mistakes I ever thought I did in my life was buying Bitcoin when it was at 900 in 2014. I thought it was a terrible mistake when I saw it hit 900, like, because it was at 1200 and then it dropped and it was at 900, and I bought a bunch of Bitcoin at 900, and I was like, oh no, what did I do? Because it kept dropping. And then it went down to 150, 130, and it hovered, kind of in the low 100s for quite a while before it started coming back up. But it took, years before it got back up over 900. And I thought this was one of the worst mistakes ever, right? There's a lot of people sitting right now that bought in the 30s, bought in the 40s, bought in the 50s, and they're thinking the same thing, right? But the reality is we're still incredibly new in this technology, and the technology has not changed. The soundness of what we're building has not changed. We're in an ecosystem right now where anyone with a check from your checking account has both your account information and your routing information, can actually empty your checking account. They can reach in and create an ACH transaction and empty your checking account. There is very little security in banking. Anyone with your credit card number or a picture of your credit card can all of a sudden, order food online and go shopping online, and you're paying for that, and now we have all these, fraud services and all these LifeLock services and things trying to protect your identity. But in reality is our information is very, very public when it comes to banking, when it comes to social identity. We have very little control over our finances in a very sovereign way. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency solves that. It actually gives you the power. No one else can access your Bitcoin account but you, unless you're incredibly foolish with your private keys. Which is, there's a whole another conversation about how to properly store your Bitcoin and how to properly transact. But at the end of the day, if you're storing your private keys correctly, if you have a mnemonic that you memorize and then you delete all other sources of that mnemonic, no one else can access that but you. No one else can control your funds but you. No government can reach in and take it. No financial institution can seize it. I mean, that's true freedom, and that's what we're building for. So when you consider the world economy, you have 21 million Bitcoins that will ever exist, and a lot of those have already been mined. We're already, between 19 and 20 million have been mined. And we have barely 1.5 million left to go or thereabouts. That's not a lot more Bitcoin that's entered the ecosystem. And a lot of Bitcoin has been burned already. So at the end of the day, we're trading an incredibly rare asset. When you buy Bitcoin, you're buying an incredibly rare asset. And it is the only, coin that at scale is currently being mined and backed by decentralized compute power. It's not a proof of stake coin, so it's not mob rule. It is decentralized hash rate. So anywhere someone has cheap electricity, they can enter into this ecosystem and participate. That's the amazing thing about proof of work. I will get in debates with people on proof of work, proof of stake all day long. I truly think proof of work and Bitcoin is going to be the value store moving into the future. So whether you bought at 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, no one's going to care in 3 years, because it's just going to become more and more rare and more and more utility around it.
I totally agree with you. And I'm going to put an idea to you, which somebody put to me the other day. So just digest it, sit on it, and, let me know what you think. So I said to somebody, Bitcoin, of course, is proof of work and everything. And somebody said, well, actually, it's proof of stake. And I was like, educate me. Why is it proof of stake? And they said, because you have to buy the machinery. So you have to have a stake in the machinery. And I was like, yeah, but that's not how it works. And they were sort of like, well, it's X amount of money you have to put down in order to be able to mine Bitcoin. So at its base level, it's proof of stake. And I was just like, no, that doesn't sit right with me. So, what'd you say to that?
So yes, at the very.
Have you heard that before, by the way?
Yes, I've heard it before. My buddy Marshall is big on saying that, it's proof of stake coin. So yes, at the very basis of stake, you're staking cost of electricity, you're staking cost of hardware.
Yes.
You're putting up a large amounts in order to do this. But there's still like an air gap there, if you will, because you're still having to guess the correct number to solve the block to get paid out. There is no guarantee that just because you put this stake into the ecosystem that you're going to get paid out. There is still a factor of luck to it, right? So what I'll say is it's locked up potential. So whether you're in a proof of stake coin, when you stake that coin, you're having to lock up potential. You're locking up the liquidity of that coin in order to earn on it or earn interest or mint other blocks with it. In Bitcoin, you're having to lock up potential. You're having to take finances and put them into infrastructure in order to create more coins. So in the raw sense of stake, I would say yes, that's a correct statement. And if you just want to confuse the hell out of people, then yes, that's a correct statement as well.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. But no, I think it's interesting. I think you make the perfect point that it is still about that luck in, guessing, finding, excuse me, finding, the puzzle as they put it, and guessing that right number. So yeah, it's still proof of work. It's just if you want to confuse people and make them uncomfortable, you tell them it's proof of stake. So Ryan, it's been so fascinating speaking with you. Learning about hash power, learning how we can further decentralize the Bitcoin network, given different countries are cracking down on Bitcoin mining, and it's important to decentralize the Bitcoin network as much as possible. So how can people follow you, follow what Lumen is doing, and obviously get involved? I'm going to leave a link in the description below after the show, but how can people follow you and everything Lumen is doing?
Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter. So hello Lumen at Twitter. We're on Telegram. Just go to lumen.io. You'll see all the links. You can follow me on Twitter. It's rcondren. I think you already linked me on Twitter. I unfortunately am not super active on social media. I probably should become more active according to my marketing team. But you can follow me as well. Maybe I'll tweet a recipe or something.
No, you should be. I agree with your marketing team. Twitter is where it's at. Twitter's great. But Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great.
And guys, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to follow Ryan, check out Lumen, and also don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed the show. We will see you all next time. Bye-bye.